The chandeliers of the Wallace mansion shimmered like liquid diamonds, bathing the guests in warm gold light. Laughter filled the room, crystal glasses clinked, and a soft symphony floated through the air. It was supposed to be a night of joy, the night Mei Lin and her husband, Richard Wallace, announced her pregnancy. She wore a soft silk dress, her hand resting protectively over the gentle curve of her belly. Richard, tall and charming, stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders for the cameras. "We're expecting," he said proudly, flashing the kind of smile that had once made her believe in forever. Applause erupted. To the crowd, they were perfect, beauty, wealth, and power personified. But behind that practiced grin, Richard's jaw tightened. Across the room, his mother, Madame Zhao, stood in a crimson cheongsam, her smile carved from ice. When the crowd dispersed, she approached Mei Lin with a look that could slice through glass. "Have you confirmed the gender?" she asked softly, but there was nothing gentle in her tone. Mei Lin blinked, caught off guard. "Not yet. It doesn't matter as long as the baby is healthy." Madame Zhao's lips curved into something cold and sharp. "Healthy is not enough. The Wallace name deserves a son." The words landed like a knife between Mei Lin's ribs. Richard said nothing, just stared at the floor, his silence louder than any slap. Her smile froze in place, the sound of laughter and music fading into a distant hum. That night, as the last guest left, Richard poured himself a drink. "You shouldn't have said that in front of her," Mei Lin whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't look at her. "She's right. You know how important this is to the family." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Richard, it's our child." His glass slammed against the counter, shattering. "Don't start, Mei Lin. Not tonight." Her hand flew to her stomach, instinctively shielding the tiny life inside. The scent of whiskey mixed with blood from a small cut on his palm. For a moment, she thought she saw something terrifying flicker behind his eyes. Not anger, but hatred. Outside, the rain began to fall, a steady rhythm against the windows. Madame Zhao's voice echoed faintly from the hallway. "If it's a girl, we'll take care of it quietly." Mei Lin froze. The music had stopped. The party was over. And somewhere deep in her chest, a silent scream began to rise. She didn't know it yet, but that scream would one day bring down an empire. The hum of the ultrasound machine filled the sterile room, blending with the soft rhythmic beeps of the monitor. Mei Lin lay on the examination table, her fingers clenched tightly around the edge of the thin sheet covering her legs. The nurse smiled kindly, moving the probe across her belly as a faint image appeared on the screen. A tiny heartbeat, strong and steady. "It's perfect," the nurse said softly. "Do you want to know the gender?" Mei Lin hesitated, glancing at Richard beside her. His eyes were glued to his phone. He didn't even look up. Her heart sank, but she forced a smile. "Yes," she whispered. The nurse turned the monitor toward them, her tone cheerful. "Congratulations. It's a girl." Time froze. The nurse's smile faded when she saw the change in Richard's face, the slight flinch in his jaw, the way his fingers tightened around the phone. He gave no reaction, just stood up abruptly. "We're done here," he muttered. "Richard," Mei Lin called softly, panic in her voice. "She's our daughter." He turned, his eyes sharp and cold. "You don't understand how things work here, Mei Lin." And just like that, he was gone, leaving her half-dressed, the sound of the fetal heartbeat still echoing in the room like a cruel reminder of everything she might lose. Outside, the winter sky was gray. Mei Lin walked alone to the car, clutching the ultrasound photo in trembling hands. A smiling nurse waved from the doorway, unaware that the woman she waved to was breaking inside. That night, dinner was silent. Madame Zhao sipped her tea slowly, her eyes fixed on Mei Lin like a predator measuring its prey. Finally, she spoke. "It's a girl, isn't it?" Mei Lin froze, her spoon halfway to her lips. "Yes," she said quietly, "but she's healthy?" The porcelain cup hit the table with a sharp crack. "Healthy?" Madame Zhao repeated, her voice rising. "You think health matters more than honor? Our family name cannot end with a woman." Richard didn't say a word. He just stared at his plate as if the food could save him. Mei Lin's heart throbbed painfully. "Mother, I won't get rid of my baby," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Madame Zhao's lips curved into a thin, bitter smile. "You think you have a choice?" Later that night, as Mei Lin folded baby clothes she had secretly bought, tiny pink onesies hidden behind coats in her closet, she heard footsteps behind her. Richard stood in the doorway, his face shadowed. Mother's right, he said quietly. We can try again for a son. Her heart shattered. Try again? She repeated, her voice cracking. She's alive, Richard. She has a heartbeat. She's our child. He looked at her then, truly looked at her, but his eyes were empty. Don't make this harder than it already is. Maylin sank to the floor as the door slammed behind him. She pressed the ultrasound photo to her chest and whispered through tears, I'll protect you, no matter what it costs. Outside, thunder rumbled across the Los Angeles skyline. Somewhere in the darkness, a storm was gathering, not of rain, but of vengeance, heartbreak, and a love turned into a weapon. And for the first time, Maylin realized her fight for survival had just begun. The house felt colder that night. The laughter that once echoed through its marble halls had vanished, leaving behind only silence and the faint ticking of the antique clock. Maylin sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ultrasound photo taped to the wall. It was her way of reminding herself that she still had something pure, something worth fighting for. Richard walked in without knocking, his tie loosened, his expression heavy with frustration. We need to talk, he said flatly. She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. About what the doctor said? I already told you I'm keeping her. That's exactly the problem, he interrupted, voice low but cutting. You're not listening to reason. Mother's worried. I'm worried. You don't understand what this means for our family. Her heart pounded. Richard, this is not about your family. This is about our child. He stepped closer. The air between them tightened. You don't get it, do you? Everything I've built, my reputation, my future, it all depends on me having a son. A daughter doesn't carry the Wallace name. Then she'll carry mine, Maylin whispered. For a moment, silence filled the room, his face twisted, disbelief giving way to anger. What did you just say? Her name will be Lynn, she said again, her voice steadier this time. She's mine too. The slap came out of nowhere, sharp, fast, and final. The sound cracked through the room like lightning. Maylin's cheek burned as her body froze in shock. Richard's chest heaved. His hand trembled slightly, as if he, too, couldn't believe what he had done. You made me do that, he muttered. Why do you always push me? Maylin swallowed back tears. You just hit the mother of your child. He turned away, pacing, his voice rising. You don't understand what pressure I'm under. I'm trying to protect us. Mother thinks you're losing it. Maylin, maybe she's right. Those words pierced deeper than any slap could. She wanted to scream, but the lump in her throat silenced her. When he left the room, slamming the door behind him, she collapsed onto the bed, pressing her hand against her cheek. It was still warm from the impact. In the mirror across from her, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back looked broken. Eyes swollen, hair disheveled, skin bruised. She whispered to her reflection, You promised him forever. He promised to protect you. Downstairs she heard Madame Zhao's voice, calm and deliberate. You see, Richard? She's becoming unstable. Maybe it's the hormones. We should get her checked. Quietly. Maylin's blood ran cold. They weren't going to stop. This wasn't about tradition anymore. It was about control. That night, as rain tapped against the window, Maylin stood barefoot in the dark nursery she had begun to decorate. She ran her fingers over a tiny blanket embroidered with the name she'd secretly chosen. Hope. Her reflection shimmered in the glass. A woman beaten, but not broken. She whispered to her unborn daughter, I'll take every bruise if it means you'll be free. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face, determination where there had been fear. And somewhere deep inside, something in Maylin finally woke up. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the Wallace dining hall, gilding the silverware and crystal glasses with a deceptive warmth. Maylin had woken up early, carefully concealing the faint bruise on her cheek with makeup. The smell of coffee and jasmine tea lingered in the air, but the tension was heavier than ever. She wanted to believe things could return to normal, that maybe last night had been a terrible dream. She had set the breakfast table herself, hoping a peaceful morning might soften Richard's mood. When she heard footsteps descending the grand staircase, she straightened her dress and forced a smile. But it wasn't just Richard who entered. Behind him was a tall, elegant woman with sharp features, dressed in a beige silk blouse and pencil skirt that screamed quiet power. She looked at Maylin with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Maylin, Richard said casually, this is Vanessa Hu. She's my new communications consultant. She'll be joining us for breakfast before we head to the office." The room tilted slightly. "Joining us?" Maylin repeated softly. Vanessa extended her manicured hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Richard has told me so much about you." Her tone was smooth, too smooth. Maylin shook her hand out of politeness, but her stomach churned. There was something unsettling in the way Vanessa looked at Richard, a familiarity that crossed the boundaries of professionalism. Madame Zhao entered next, her gaze sweeping over Vanessa approvingly. "Ah, Miss Hu, so elegant. I see why Richard trusts you." Vanessa smiled. "I try my best to take care of him." Maylin's grip on her teacup tightened until she feared it might shatter. Richard didn't correct her. He simply nodded, a faint smirk playing on his lips. Throughout breakfast, conversation flowed around her like a current she couldn't fight against. Madame Zhao praised Vanessa's business sense, Vanessa complimented Richard's leadership, and Richard basked in their attention. Maylin sat silently, pushing food around her plate. When Vanessa reached for the sugar bowl, her hand brushed Richard's. They shared a fleeting glance, one that spoke volumes. Maylin saw it, and so did Madame Zhao. The older woman said nothing, just smiled faintly and sipped her tea. After the meal, Richard stood to leave. "Vanessa, we'll take my car," he said. "It'll save time." Maylin's voice trembled. "Richard, I thought we were having lunch together today." He adjusted his cufflinks, avoiding her eyes. "Another time. This meeting's important." Vanessa flashed a sympathetic smile. "Don't worry, Mrs. Wallace. I'll take good care of him." The front door closed with a dull thud that seemed to echo forever. Maylin stood in the silence of the empty dining hall, surrounded by half-eaten croissants and cold tea. Upstairs, she walked into the nursery, the air heavy with the scent of baby powder and fear. She touched her belly, whispering to her unborn child, "They think I don't see, but I do. I see everything." Then she glanced out the window, just in time to see Richard opening the car door for Vanessa, his hand gently resting on the small of her back. For the first time, the pain turned to something sharper, colder. And that morning, love quietly began to die, replaced by the slow, burning seed of vengeance. The night began like any other, quiet, heavy, and cold. Rain drummed against the windows, a steady heartbeat echoing through the empty halls of the Wallace mansion. Maylin sat alone in the nursery, sewing tiny ribbons onto the soft pink blanket she had made. Each stitch was a whisper of hope, a promise that her baby girl would know love even if her world was built on lies. Downstairs, the sound of laughter shattered the stillness, a woman's laugh, light, intimate. Maylin froze, the needle slipping through her trembling fingers. She rose slowly and followed the sound. Through the half-open study door she saw them, Richard and Vanessa, standing too close, their heads bent together over a glass of wine. Richard's hand rested casually on Vanessa's waist, his wedding ring glinting under the lamplight. The room spun. "Richard?" Maylin's voice cracked, barely above a whisper. They turned. Vanessa stepped back instantly, pretending to adjust her blouse, but Richard didn't even flinch. His expression was flat, annoyed. "You should be in bed." "In bed?" Maylin repeated, her voice shaking. "While you drink with her in our home?" "Don't start," he said sharply. "You're overreacting again." "Overreacting?" Her voice rose. "You're cheating on me, Richard." He set his glass down, the clink echoing like thunder. "Watch your tone." Tears stung her eyes. "I have given up everything for you, my family, my freedom. And this is what I get? You and your mother treating me like I'm nothing. Enough." He stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. "You don't get to talk to me like that. I'm your wife," she screamed, clutching her belly, "and I'm carrying your child." That was when he snapped. His voice exploded through the room like gunfire. "Shut up!" In one violent motion, Richard grabbed her by the shoulders and shoved her against the wall. Her head hit the frame, the world flashing white. Before she could breathe, his hand wrapped around her throat. "Shut up!" he roared again, his grip tightening. Maylin clawed at his hands, gasping, her nails digging into his skin. The room blurred, her vision darkening at the edges. The sound of rain grew distant, muffled. She tried to speak, but only a strangled whisper came out. "Please, Richard, the baby." His face was unrecognizable, eyes wild, veins bulging, teeth clenched. Vanessa stood frozen in horror, tears pooling in her eyes. "Richard, stop! You're hurting her!" she shouted, pulling at his arm. He released her abruptly. Maylin collapsed onto the floor, coughing violently, clutching her stomach. Blood stained her trembling fingers. Vanessa knelt beside her, pale and shaking. "Oh my God, she's bleeding." Richard took a step back, his chest heaving, realization dawning too late. It's not my fault," he stammered. "She provoked me." Maylin looked up at him, her voice raw and broken. "You almost killed your daughter." For the first time, Richard looked afraid, not of what he'd done, but of what would happen if anyone found out. He turned to Vanessa, whispering, "You didn't see anything. Do you understand?" Vanessa's eyes hardened. "I saw everything." Thunder cracked outside, shaking the windows. Maylin's breath came in shallow gasps as she whispered to herself, "No one will believe me." But deep inside, something shifted. It wasn't fear anymore. It was resolve. That night, under the storm, the woman who loved Richard Wallace died, and the one who would destroy him was born. When Maylin woke, everything hurt. Her throat burned with each breath. Her head throbbed where it had struck the wall, and the faint metallic taste of blood lingered on her tongue. She blinked against the dim light filtering through the curtains. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the truth hit. She was still in the same house, the same bed, the same nightmare. The door was locked. Panic surged through her chest. She stumbled to her feet, rushing to the door. The handle didn't budge. "Richard?" she whispered, then louder. "Richard?" No answer. She banged on the wood, her voice cracking. "Let me out." Only silence answered. After what felt like hours, the sound of heels clicked against the marble floor outside. The door creaked open, and Madame Zhao entered, holding a porcelain tray with a cup of tea and a small white pill beside it. "You should rest," she said calmly. "The doctor says stress isn't good for the baby." Maylin backed away, her body trembling. "Where's Richard?" "Busy," Madame Zhao replied, setting the tray down on the dresser. "You frightened him last night. All that screaming, the accusations, you're lucky he's willing to forgive you." "Forgive me?" Maylin's voice broke. "He tried to kill me." Madame Zhao's expression didn't change. "You fell. He told me what happened. You were hysterical." "That's a lie." The older woman sighed, as if speaking to a stubborn child. "People believe what they're told, my dear. And right now, everyone thinks you're unstable. The medication will help." Her hand gestured to the pill on the tray. Maylin's stomach twisted. "What is that?" "Something to calm your nerves." She shook her head. "I'm not taking it." Madame Zhao's voice turned icy. "Then you'll stay locked in this room until you do." When she left, the door clicked shut, and the key turned in the lock again. The sound echoed like a verdict. Maylin sank to the floor, trembling. She looked around. Her phone was gone, the landline unplugged, even the window handles removed. Hours passed. Her hunger gnawed at her, but she refused the tea. She couldn't risk being drugged. The shadows grew longer as daylight faded, and for the first time she realized she had no idea what day it was. The only sound came from the small baby monitor on the dresser. "Richard's idea," he said, "to keep her safe." It was always on, recording everything. That night, she stared into the black eye of the camera above the door and whispered, "If anyone's watching, please help me." Her voice cracked, tears rolling down her bruised face. She pressed her palm against her belly, whispering, "I won't let them take you. I promise." In another part of the house, the monitor light blinked, faint, unnoticed. But miles away, on a secured server that Richard didn't even know existed, a single alert pinged. A man in Hong Kong checked his tablet and frowned as he watched the trembling figure of a woman locked in a room. His name was Victor Zhao, and he had just discovered the sister he thought he'd lost was very much alive and in danger. The second night inside the locked room felt endless. The air was thick with the scent of stale tea and fear. Maylin hadn't slept. Every creak in the floorboards made her flinch. Every shadow looked like Richard. The pill on the tray still sat untouched, a silent symbol of her defiance. She knew she couldn't stay trapped forever. Her baby's heartbeat depended on her getting out. At dawn, when the first light broke through the curtains, she began searching for anything, something she could use. She tore open drawers, lifted the edge of the carpet, checked under the bed. Nothing. Then her eyes landed on the small digital baby monitor. Its green light blinked softly in the dark. She remembered Richard saying it connected directly to a private security cloud. If that was true, maybe, just maybe, she could use it. Her hands shook as she picked it up. "Please," she whispered. "Please, still be connected." She pressed the small button labeled pair, the one that reconnected the signal. The light flickered once, twice, then turned blue. Somewhere far away, a new stream of footage began uploading automatically to the security network. She moved close to the lens and began speaking, her voice hoarse and breaking. "My name is Mei Lin Zhao Wallace. I'm being held in my house. My husband, Richard Wallace, he hurt me. He's trying to force me to end my pregnancy. Please, whoever sees this, help me." She spoke for nearly 5 minutes before the battery died, her words swallowed by silence. Hours later, thousands of miles away in Hong Kong, a soft notification pinged inside a sleek penthouse overlooking Victoria Harbor. Victor Zhao glanced at his tablet distractedly. The alert was from an old system his father once used to monitor their American properties. He almost ignored it until the thumbnail showed a woman's face. Pale, bruised, crying. He froze. He tapped the screen, enlarging the feed. And there she was. Mei Lin. The half-sister he hadn't seen since his father's funeral. The child of the woman his family had cast aside. His chest tightened. "No," he whispered, his throat dry. He replayed the footage twice, each word carving deeper into his conscience. His assistant Aaron entered the room, startled by the look on his face. "Sir, what is it?" Victor's voice was cold steel. "Get me everything you can on Richard Wallace. Travel records, financials, security access, everything." Aaron blinked. "Immediately, sir. But are you sure this woman, she's my sister?" Victor cut in, his tone final. "And she's in trouble." Within an hour, Victor's private jet was prepped. He hadn't seen Mei Lin in years, not since his father's will tore their family apart. He'd been young, angry, convinced she was the reason his mother had suffered. He'd told himself he didn't care. But now, watching her plead for help, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: guilt. As the jet soared across the Pacific, Victor stared at the blinking cursor on his phone, hovering over Richard's number. He didn't press call. Not yet. He needed proof. Meanwhile, back in Los Angeles, Mei Lin sat curled on the floor, clutching her belly. She had no idea her message had escaped, no idea help was already on its way. Outside her window, thunder rumbled in the distance, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to whisper one word: hope. Far above the clouds, Victor whispered the same word, and swore to himself that whoever had done this would regret ever touching his blood. The storm hit Los Angeles just as midnight struck. Thunder rumbling like a warning from the heavens. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the city into a blur of lights and shadows. Inside the Wallace mansion, the world had gone silent, except for the steady tapping of raindrops against Mei Lin's locked window. She sat in the dark, her body weak, but her mind sharp. Every sound outside made her heart race. She had overheard Richard earlier that day, speaking on the phone downstairs. "Tomorrow," he had said. "The clinic at 9. She won't remember a thing." That was it, the end, unless she found a way out tonight. She tried the door again, locked. The window, bolted shut. Her breathing quickened. Then she remembered the old balcony outside the guest room. The one with the loose railing Richard had promised to fix but never did. Lightning flashed. The keyhole on her door glimmered faintly. She still had the thin silver hairpin she'd hidden in her nightgown. A small thing, but it had to be enough. Her hands shook as she bent the metal and worked it into the lock. Minutes passed. The storm grew louder. Finally, click. The door opened. Mei Lin's heart slammed against her ribs. She tiptoed through the hallway, careful to avoid the creaky floorboards. From the living room below came the faint hum of the security TV. Richard was asleep on the couch, an empty whiskey glass beside him. She moved like a ghost, every breath silent. At the top of the stairs, she saw Madame Zhao's room, the door slightly open. Inside, the older woman slept soundly, a glass of untouched tea beside her. The smell of ginseng filled the air. Mei Lin slipped past, down the corridor, to the guest room. The balcony door groaned as she pushed it open. Cold wind and rain slammed into her face. She stepped out, gripping the slick railing. Her dress clung to her skin, her hair plastered to her cheeks. Below her, the driveway, the iron gates, freedom. But it was a 2-story drop. Her hands trembled. Her belly tightened painfully. "Please," she whispered to her unborn child. "Hold on. Just a little longer." She climbed over the railing. Her bare foot slipped, sending a jolt of terror through her body. Then, headlights. A black car skidded to a stop outside the gate, its engine roared. A man stepped out, tall and drenched, his coat whipping in the wind. Maylin, her heart stopped, the voice deep, unmistakable. "Victor," she gasped. He looked up, rain streaming down his face. "Jump," she hesitated. "I can't." "You can," he shouted. "I've got you." She took a deep breath, whispered a prayer, and leapt. The world spun. For a second she felt weightless, then strong arms caught her. Victor staggered, but held her tight. "You're safe now," he whispered, his voice breaking. From the house, lights flared. Richard's voice thundered from the doorway. "What the hell?" "Drive," Victor barked, shoving Maylin into the car. Tires screeched against wet pavement as the vehicle tore down the street. Through the rear window she saw Richard's figure shrinking into the rain, a ghost of the man who once promised her the world. She pressed a hand to her belly. The baby kicked, a sign of life, a sign of defiance. Victor looked over, his jaw tight. "You're not alone anymore," he said. Maylin turned to the window, watching the storm swallow the mansion behind her. For the first time in months, she was free. But freedom was only the beginning of the fight. The private jet sliced through the dark sky, leaving Los Angeles behind like a bad dream. The storm still raged below, lightning flashing across the clouds like the world itself was angry. Inside the cabin, everything was quiet, except for the low hum of the engines and Maylin's uneven breathing. She sat curled in the leather seat, wrapped in Victor's coat, her wet hair clinging to her face. Her eyes were swollen, her throat raw, but she was alive, and that meant everything. Across from her, Victor sat motionless, watching her closely, his jaw tight. He looked like he wanted to speak but didn't know where to start. Finally he said, "You're safe now." Maylin's voice was barely a whisper. "Safe until he finds me." Victor's gaze hardened. "He won't. I made sure of it. My team wiped the flight records. By the time Richard realizes you're gone, you'll be halfway across the Pacific." She looked at him, tears glinting in her eyes. "Why did you come for me, Victor? You haven't spoken to me in 10 years. His silence was long, heavy. "Because I saw that video," he said at last. "Because I didn't help our mother when she needed me, and I won't make that mistake again." Maylin swallowed hard. "You think saving me makes up for the past?" "No," he said quietly, "but it's a start." For a long time they said nothing. Maylin watched the clouds drift by, each one glowing silver in the moonlight. The baby shifted inside her, and she pressed her hand to her belly. "She's strong," she murmured. "She survived all of that." Victor's expression softened for the first time. "What will you name her?" "Hope," Maylin said, her lips trembling into a small smile. "Because that's all I had left." He nodded. "Then Hope it is." A flight attendant entered quietly, offering warm tea and a blanket. Maylin took the cup with shaking hands. The warmth seeped through her fingers, melting the chill that had gripped her for days. For the first time since the nightmare began, she allowed herself to close her eyes. As she drifted between exhaustion and fragile peace, Victor opened his laptop. Lines of data scrolled across the screen. Richard's accounts, company shares, offshore transfers. The deeper he dug, the darker it got. "Ruthless," he muttered. "He's been stealing from his own investors for years." Aaron, his assistant, appeared on the small monitor. "Sir, what's the plan when you land?" Victor's voice was calm but deadly. "First, she gets medical attention. Then, we start taking back everything they took from her." "Understood." Hours later, the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Maylin stirred awake, the soft light touching her face. For a brief moment she forgot the bruises, the fear, the pain, and simply breathed. "Do you think," she asked softly, "people like us ever really get second chances?" Victor looked out the window, the reflection of dawn flickering in his eyes. "No one gives you a second chance," he said. "You take it." The jet began its descent toward Hong Kong, the city glittering like a promise below. Maylin straightened her back, her fingers tightening around the pendant she wore. A small jade charm her mother had given her years ago. She wasn't running anymore. She was arriving. And somewhere over the sea, the broken girl from Los Angeles became the woman who would destroy Richard Wallace. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. Outside, Hong Kong's skyline glittered in the night like a million watchful eyes. Maylin lay motionless on the bed, her skin pale against the white sheets, sweat dampening her hair. Hours had passed in pain, in panic, in prayer. Now it was almost over. Breathe, the doctor said gently. You're doing great, Maylin. One more push. Her fingers gripped the rails of the bed, knuckles white. She bit her lip, fighting back a scream as tears streamed down her face. Please, God, just let her live. Then a cry pierced the silence, sharp, pure, alive. The room seemed to stop. The doctor smiled, lifting a tiny, wriggling bundle into the air. Congratulations, he said softly. It's a healthy baby girl. Maylin's body went limp, her sobs quiet but uncontrollable. When they placed the baby on her chest, she felt the world shift. The warmth, the heartbeat, the tiny fingers curling around hers, it was everything she had fought for. She's perfect, whispered the nurse. Maylin looked down at her daughter's face, fragile, peaceful, unaware of the storm that had brought her here. Her name is Hope, she said, voice trembling, because that's what she gave me. Outside the glass window, Victor watched silently, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. But when he saw the baby's face, something softened. For a man who had built empires and destroyed competitors without blinking, this was different. This was family, something he thought he had lost long ago. When the nurses left and the room dimmed, Maylin whispered to her sleeping daughter, "You're safe now. I promise no one will ever hurt you." But even as she said it, she knew safety was fragile. The shadows of the past still followed her. Richard's name lingered in every corner of her mind like smoke that refused to fade. Days passed in a quiet haze of recovery. Maylin moved carefully, her body still healing. Victor visited daily, bringing food, flowers, and silence. He didn't pry. He didn't ask about the bruises or the nightmares. He simply sat beside her, letting her know she wasn't alone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the harbor, Victor handed her an envelope. Inside were legal papers, new identity documents, bank accounts, a passport. "You can start fresh," he said. "No one will find you." Maylin looked up, eyes glistening. "You've done enough already." He shook his head. "Not yet. Richard thinks you're dead. Let him believe it, for now." She nodded, clutching the papers. For the first time, she felt something close to power. That night, when the baby stirred, Maylin walked to the window and gazed out at the glowing city below. The sky was clear, the rain gone, replaced by stars scattered like promises. She whispered to the night, to the woman she used to be, "You survived." Behind her, Victor's voice broke the silence. "She's lucky, you know, to have a mother like you." Maylin turned, smiling faintly. "No," she said softly, rocking her baby. "I'm the lucky one." The nurse entered quietly, turning off the lights. The hum of the city faded into a lullaby, and under the calm glow of Hong Kong's night, Hope slept, unaware that her first breath had already rewritten her mother's destiny. 3 weeks after Hope's birth, the world outside Maylin's hospital window looked peaceful, but her war was far from over. Healing had given her strength, but not peace. Every time she closed her eyes, she still heard Richard's voice, that terrible roar. "Shut up!" It wasn't just a memory, it was a promise, one she intended to break. Victor entered her recovery suite that morning, holding a sleek tablet and 2 cups of coffee. "You look better," he said. "I feel better," Maylin replied softly, though the circles under her eyes told another story. "But I can't rest, not yet," he nodded. "Good, because we have work to do." On the tablet, spreadsheets, offshore transfers, and shell companies filled the screen. Richard Wallace's empire wasn't built on success, it was built on fraud. He had laundered millions through fake development firms, manipulating investors while hiding assets under false identities. Maylin stared at the data, disbelief turning into fury. "He used my name?" Victor's jaw tightened. "Yes. Every forged document, every offshore account, lists you as the silent beneficiary. If this goes public, he'll claim you were his partner in crime." Her stomach turned. "He's framing me." Victor leaned forward. "Which is why we hit first." For days, they worked in secrecy. Maylin studied every file, recognizing her forged signatures. Victor's tech team hacked deeper into the financial web, uncovering transactions linking Richard to illegal fund transfers, even bribes to city officials. One night, as the rain pattered against the window, Maylin whispered, "If we expose this, he'll lose everything." Victor looked at her over the glow of the laptop. "That's the point." But Maylin's expression hardened. "No, Victor. Losing money isn't enough. I want the truth. The bruises, the lies, everything he's done. I want him to feel what I felt." Victor hesitated, then nodded. Then we'll do it your way. The next morning, he called a contact from the Hong Kong division of an international law firm, Sullivan and Cromwell. The same firm Richard once admired, now the weapon that would destroy him. We'll gather evidence here, Victor told them, then transfer it to U.S. authorities, quietly, not a leak until we're ready. Meanwhile, Mei Lin trained herself to stay calm. She attended therapy, rebuilt her strength, and took care of Hope. But when night fell, she sat in Victor's study, combing through files until dawn. It was in one of those long nights that she found it, an email chain between Richard and Madame Zhao. The subject line read, "Termination schedule." Attached was a payment receipt to a private clinic. The day after Richard had attacked her. Her hand trembled as she opened it. The message from Madame Zhao was short, ruthless. "Make sure it's done. No complications. We can't risk a daughter." Tears blurred Mei Lin's vision, but her anger was clear. "She planned everything," she whispered. Victor's voice was low, dangerous. "Then they'll both go down." By the end of the week, their plan was in motion. Evidence duplicated, backups hidden, lawyers briefed. As Mei Lin tucked Hope into her crib that night, she kissed her daughter's forehead. "I almost lost you because of them," she whispered. "But now, they'll lose everything because of you." Victor stood at the door, watching his sister, the fragile girl he once pitied, now replaced by a woman forged from pain. "Are you ready?" he asked. Mei Lin turned, her eyes calm but burning. "I was born ready. They wanted me silent." She looked down at Hope, then back at him. "Now they'll hear me loud and clear." The rain had finally stopped in Hong Kong, but the storm Mei Lin and Victor were preparing to unleash was only beginning. A month after Mei Lin's escape, Richard Wallace's real estate empire, Wallace Global Holdings, was thriving on paper. Stocks were high, investors confident, the media dazzled by his latest expansion project. What no one knew was that Victor Zhao was quietly buying pieces of that empire, one shell company at a time. In a dimly lit boardroom overlooking Victoria Harbor, Victor's assistant Aaron projected a chart onto the screen. "We've secured 32% of Wallace Global's shares through offshore intermediaries. If we push another 10, we gain control." Victor nodded. "And the board?" "Half are loyal to Richard. But money talks. They'll follow whoever saves their investments." Mei Lin sat at the end of the table, silent but alert. The woman who had once trembled in fear now carried herself with quiet command. "We can't move too fast," she said. "Richard's paranoid. If he suspects anything, he'll hide the money." Victor leaned back, studying her. "He already thinks you're gone. That's our advantage. You'll stay invisible until we make the final move." She met his gaze. "Then let's burn everything he built." Back in Los Angeles, Richard was restless. His company's cash flow was tightening. Accounts he had relied on for years were suddenly being audited. "Who authorized this?" he demanded in a board meeting. His CFO stammered, "It's the Hong Kong investors, sir. They're requesting oversight. Something about transparency protocols." Richard's temper flared. "Find out who's behind it." That night, he called Madame Zhao. "Someone's targeting me," he said, pacing his office. "Then target them back," she replied coldly. "You're a Wallace. Show them what that means." But Richard couldn't shake the unease. His empire felt unstable, as if the walls were closing in. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Victor and Mei Lin were in constant motion. Meetings, calls, documents, forged votes, all perfectly orchestrated. Mei Lin spent nights drafting letters to investors, disguised under aliases, exposing small leaks of Richard's fraud to erode trust from within. One afternoon, Victor received a call. "It's done," Aaron said. "We've hit 43%. The board's collapsing. They've called an emergency meeting in LA." Victor looked at Mei Lin. "Time to end this." The next day in Los Angeles, Richard entered the Wallace Global headquarters, his expression confident but strained. The boardroom buzzed with whispers. On the screen at the far end of the room was a name he didn't expect to see. Zhao Holdings International. The meeting began. The chairman cleared his throat. "As of this morning, Zhao Holdings has become the majority shareholder in Wallace Global. They're requesting immediate leadership restructuring." Richard laughed, the sound forced. "You can't be serious. Zhao Holdings doesn't exist." A calm voice came through the speakerphone. "It does now." Richard froze. He knew that voice. "Victor Zhao," he whispered. "Surprise," Victor replied smoothly. "You stole from my sister. Now I own you." The room erupted. Richard's face drained of color. "Your sister?" he said slowly, realization dawning. "No, she's dead." Victor's tone turned cold. "You should have made sure." Silence filled the boardroom. By the end of the meeting, Richard Wallace was no longer CEO. Zhao Holdings had taken control. Stocks plummeted overnight. Reporters flooded the entrance, demanding answers. Watching the chaos unfold on live news from Hong Kong, Mei Lin felt no joy, only closure. She whispered, "That's for every bruise, every night I thought I wouldn't wake up." Victor glanced at her and smiled faintly. "That was just the first strike," he said. "Next, we take his freedom." The morning sun broke over Hong Kong like a quiet promise, but Mei Lin wasn't watching the light. She was staring at a stack of papers spread across Victor's mahogany desk. Legal documents that could finally destroy Richard Wallace. The header read, "Complaint for domestic violence, coercion, and attempted forced abortion." Mei Lin's name was listed as the plaintiff. Her fingers trembled slightly as she signed the last page. "Once this goes public," she said softly, "there's no turning back." Victor leaned against the desk, his expression unreadable. "You understand what this means. They'll come after you. The lawyers, the press, everyone. He'll try to paint you as unstable." She looked up, her eyes sharp. "They already did. The difference is, this time, I'm ready." The plan was simple but brutal. Within 24 hours, Mei Lin's legal team, backed by Victor's connections, would file the lawsuit in both Los Angeles and Hong Kong courts, attaching video evidence, medical reports, and copies of Richard's financial fraud. It was a perfect storm of scandal, domestic abuse meeting corporate crime. By noon, the first news leak appeared online. A headline blazed across international outlets. "Business tycoon Richard Wallace sued by missing wife for attempted forced abortion." The internet exploded. Social media turned into a war zone of opinions. Supporters of women's rights hailed Mei Lin as a symbol of courage. Others doubted her story. But one thing was certain, no one could ignore it. In Los Angeles, Richard slammed his phone onto his desk, shattering the screen. "Who leaked this?" he barked. Madame Zhao's voice came through the speakerphone, cold and trembling with fury. "You promised me she was gone." Richard paced the room. "I don't know how she did it, but I'll shut her down." He called his PR team, his lawyers, even the clinic he had paid to falsify records. "You'll testify she was delusional," he said. "Tell them she threatened to hurt herself." But his empire was already cracking. Reporters camped outside his mansion, investors pulled their money, and protesters chanted at his gates. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, Mei Lin stood before the mirror, adjusting her simple white dress. She didn't wear makeup, she didn't need to. The truth was her armor. Victor entered, holding his phone. "Press conference starts in 5 minutes, he said quietly. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Mei Lin smiled faintly. "I've been silent long enough." When she stepped onto the stage, flashes blinded her. Microphones pointed forward like weapons, but her voice was calm. "My name is Mei Lin Wallace," she began. "I survived what most people only read about. I was beaten, silenced, and nearly killed, not by a stranger, but by the man who vowed to protect me." The crowd fell silent. "I don't want pity. I want justice, not just for me, but for every woman who's been told to keep quiet for the sake of family, for reputation, for fear." Her voice wavered but didn't break. "You can call me a victim, but I call myself a survivor." Applause erupted. Not polite, but thunderous, raw, real. Somewhere in Los Angeles, Richard watched the live broadcast on his office TV. His reflection stared back at him, pale, sweating, cornered. He hurled a glass against the wall, the shards scattering like the pieces of his empire. "She's not going to win," he muttered. But deep down he knew. The woman he tried to silence had just found her voice, and the whole world was listening. The courthouse in downtown Los Angeles was surrounded by a sea of flashing cameras and murmuring crowds. Reporters shouted questions, protesters held signs, and news vans lined the street like vultures circling their prey. Inside, the marble floors gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights. Mei Lin walked through the main corridor, flanked by her lawyer and Victor. She wore a simple navy dress, her long black hair pulled into a low bun. She didn't look like a billionaire's wife. She looked like a woman who had survived hell and was ready to face it again. "Are you sure about this?" her lawyer, Sarah Chen, whispered as they entered the courtroom. Mei Lin nodded. "I've been sure since the night he tried to kill me." When they stepped inside, The air thickened with tension. Richard was already seated at the defense table, dressed in a tailored gray suit. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion, but he still forced a confident smirk. Next to him sat his attorney, the infamous Harvey Lang, a man known for destroying victims on the stand. Madame Zhao sat directly behind Richard, her face unreadable beneath a veil of quiet disdain. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The judge entered, and the trial began. Sarah stood first, her voice clear. "Your Honor, this case is not just about money or contracts. It's about power, control, and the systematic abuse of a woman who was denied her basic right to choose, to live, to protect her child, to speak." She turned toward the jury, her tone steady but sharp. "You will see evidence that Mr. Richard Wallace physically assaulted his wife, falsified medical reports, and conspired with his mother to force a termination, and when she resisted, he nearly killed her." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Then came the video, the one from the baby monitor. The screen flickered to life, showing a grainy image of Mei Lin sitting in the corner of a locked room, whispering into the lens. "My name is Mei Lin Zhao Wallace. I'm being held here. Please help me." Her voice, trembling and raw, filled the courtroom. Richard's expression changed. For the first time, his composure cracked. He turned to his lawyer, whispering furiously, "You said that footage was deleted." Harvey's jaw clenched. "Apparently not." The prosecution continued. Photos of Maylin's bruises appeared on the screen, hospital reports verifying trauma, emails between Richard and Madame Zhao discussing termination schedules. When Sarah finished, the room was silent, except for the faint sound of cameras clicking outside the door. Then it was Harvey's turn. He stood, smirking. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're witnessing is not truth, but theater. Mrs. Wallace, or Miss Zhao as she prefers to call herself now, is an actress in her own tragedy. There's no proof my client ever laid a hand on her. In fact, we'll show she staged these injuries to blackmail him." Mei Lin didn't flinch. When her turn came, she took the stand, her voice calm but cutting. "If I staged everything," she said, "then why did I almost die? Why did I have to run? Why did I hide my child halfway across the world?" Richard's face hardened, but his fingers trembled. When the session adjourned, the courtroom erupted into noise. Reporters, whispers, chaos. But Mei Lin didn't hear any of it. She looked only at Richard. He leaned forward and hissed under his breath, "You'll regret this." She met his gaze and said quietly, "I already did. Now it's your turn." Outside, the crowd roared her name. The world had finally taken sides, and it wasn't his. The next morning, the world woke up to a new headline that sent shockwaves through both America and China. Madame Zhao accused of covering forced abortion scheme. The story hit every major outlet within hours. Photos of the elegant matriarch, always poised and untouchable, now filled screens beside words like crime, scandal, and investigation. In the courtroom that day, Madame Zhao entered wearing a black Chanel suit and oversized sunglasses, her usual armor of pride. But the moment she stepped inside, whispers followed her like ghosts. Even Richard avoided her gaze. Mei Lin sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, her heart steady. She knew this was coming, because she'd planned it. 2 nights before, Victor had handed her a flash drive. "We got it," he'd said. "Bank transfers, clinic records, and voice recordings. She's done." Now, as the judge called the court to order, the lead prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, we have new evidence connecting Madame Zhao to the events surrounding Mrs. Wallace's abuse." Harvey Lang jumped up from the defense table. "Objection. She's not on trial." "She will be," the prosecutor interrupted. The courtroom screens came alive. Audio crackled. A woman's voice, cold, measured, unmistakable, filled the room. "If it's a girl, end it quietly. He'll thank me later. We can't have weakness in this family." Gasps rippled through the audience. Richard's eyes widened in disbelief. "Mother, what did you?" Madame Zhao's composure shattered. She stood abruptly. "That was taken out of context. I was protecting our reputation." The judge's gavel slammed. "Sit down, Mrs. Zhao." But it was too late. The damage was done. The prosecution continued, showing wire transfers from Zhao Family Holdings to a private clinic, dated the same week Mei Lin had been attacked. They revealed messages between Madame Zhao and a doctor in Beverly Hills, her paying for silence. The courtroom turned into a storm of murmurs and camera clicks. Mei Lin's lawyer, Sarah, stood slowly. "Your Honor, this evidence proves not only Madame Zhao's knowledge, but her orchestration of the attempted forced abortion and cover-up. Madame Zhao's voice cracked, her accent thickening as her calm slipped away. That girl was a mistake. She trapped my son. She was never fit for our name. Mei Lin rose from her seat, her voice quiet but firm. Your name? She repeated. What about mine? What about my daughters? How many women did you destroy for your family? Silence fell. Even the reporters stopped typing. For a long moment, Madame Zhao stared at her, a mix of fury and fear twisting her once proud face. You think this makes you noble? She hissed. Without our money, you'd be nothing. Mei Lin stepped closer. Then I'll be nothing. But at least I'll be free. The judge's voice cut through the tension. Given the evidence presented, this court orders a formal investigation into Madame Zhao's financial dealings and her involvement in criminal coercion. Security moved in as Madame Zhao shouted in Mandarin, You ungrateful witch! You ruined my son. Richard sank into his chair, his empire collapsing around him piece by piece. Outside the courthouse, the crowd roared as cameras flashed. The narrative had changed, from wealthy scandal to a woman's rebellion against generations of silence. Standing at the courthouse steps, Mei Lin whispered to Victor, she built her power on fear. Victor looked at her, pride flickering in his eyes. And you just took that power away. By dawn, the entire world was watching. Every news channel, every trending feed, every social platform was flooded with one name, Mei Lin Wallace. Clips of her courtroom testimony spread like wildfire. The video of her whispering for help from the locked room had gone viral, captioned with hashtags like Justice for Mei Lin and hashtag and She Spoke Up. People who had never met her were crying over her story. Women from across the world shared their own experiences of abuse and silence. Overnight, she became a symbol, not just of survival, but defiance. But not everyone believed. In Los Angeles, Richard's PR team worked around the clock. They released edited footage, claiming Mei Lin had staged her abuse to gain attention. Anonymous sources spread rumors that she had mental health issues, that she'd abandoned her husband, that the baby might not even be his. Talk shows debated her case like it was a scandal, not a tragedy. Headlines screamed, Angel or actress? The truth about Mei Lin Wallace. Family honor destroyed by greed? Victor threw a newspaper onto the table, his jaw tight. They're trying to turn her into the villain, he said. Mei Lin glanced at the headline, then at her baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. Let them talk, she said quietly. The truth doesn't need defending, it just needs to survive. Still, the attacks grew worse. Hackers tried to access her medical files. Anonymous threats filled her inbox. One night, a message arrived that made her blood run cold. You should have stayed quiet. Some stories aren't meant to end well. Victor wanted to move her to a safe house, but Mei Lin refused. If I hide now, they win, she told him. Meanwhile, the tide of public opinion began to shift. Influential women, actresses, journalists, activists rallied behind her. Talk shows invited psychologists and legal experts who called her case a turning point for victims worldwide. When Madame Zhao's past crimes surfaced, including a similar forced abortion scandal from decades earlier, the narrative flipped completely. The same networks that once doubted Mei Lin now aired documentaries calling her the woman who broke the silence. Richard, on the other hand, was imploding. Investors had withdrawn, board members resigned, and his frozen assets left him drowning in debt. At a press conference, a reporter asked him, Mr. Wallace, did you ever love your wife? Richard forced a smile. Of course I did. She was unstable, but I tried to help her. Within hours, the clip was replayed next to the video of him screaming, "Shut up!" in court. The world didn't buy his sympathy act. The next morning, as Mei Lin scrolled through her phone, she saw something that made her stop. A trending post with over 10 million likes showed a photo of her holding hope in court, captioned, "They tried to silence her. Now she speaks for all of us." Tears welled in her eyes. She turned to Victor, who stood by the window, phone in hand. "You did this," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, you did. You turned pain into power." Outside, cameras flashed through the hospital glass. Reporters waited for a statement, but Mei Lin stayed silent. She didn't need to say anything. Her story had already spoken louder than words. Victor looked at her and said quietly, "You've already won the world, Mei Lin. Now let's make sure he loses everything." Los Angeles had never looked smaller to Richard Wallace. The city that once bent at his command now seemed to close in around him. Every billboard, every screen flashing his disgraced face. The headlines that once hailed him as a visionary now branded him a monster. Wallace Global under investigation for fraud and domestic violence cover-up. CEO's fortune frozen amid abuse allegations. He threw the newspaper across his penthouse, shattering a crystal glass on the marble floor. "They're vultures," he shouted, pacing like a caged animal. His lawyer, Harvey Lang, stood near the doorway, expression grim. "It's not just the press anymore. The SEC, the DOJ, even the IRS are investigating. You've got weeks before this whole thing becomes a criminal case." Richard's voice cracked. "You're supposed to fix this." "I can't fix prison, Richard," Harvey snapped. "You lied to me. You didn't tell me about the fake accounts, the forged signatures, using her name." Richard's eyes darkened. "She deserved it." Harvey shook his head. "No. You destroyed yourself." Meanwhile, across the ocean, Mei Lin watched the collapse unfold on television. She sat beside Victor, holding hope in her arms, as the evening news reported live from Wallace Global headquarters. The reporter's tone was electric. After weeks of investigation, documents leaked to the press reveal years of corporate fraud, including embezzlement, money laundering, and illegal transfers through Zhao family holdings. Today, authorities officially froze all assets belonging to Richard Wallace and his mother, Madame Zhao. Mei Lin's lips parted, disbelief and justice blending into something powerful. "It's happening," she whispered. Victor smiled faintly. "I told you, they fall harder than they rise." Back in Los Angeles, Richard's empire was collapsing piece by piece. His employees fled. His mansion was surrounded by reporters. Even Vanessa, once his loyal mistress, refused to answer his calls. Late one night, he sat alone in his office, the city lights reflecting in his empty whiskey glass. His reflection stared back, unshaven, hollow-eyed, a stranger. He replayed the video of Mei Lin's testimony on his phone, her calm voice echoing, "I don't want revenge, I want justice." He slammed the phone down, shouting, "You got what you wanted. Are you happy now?" The sound of sirens in the distance made him pause. They grew louder, closer. Then came the knock. "Richard Wallace," a deep voice called through the door. "Federal agents, we have a warrant for your arrest." He froze. For a moment he considered running, but there was nowhere left to go. His name was ruined, his accounts drained, his allies gone. As agents entered reading him his rights, Richard muttered bitterly, "This is a mistake. I'm the victim here." The lead agent replied dryly, "Then you'll have plenty of time to explain that to the judge." Cameras caught the moment he was let out in handcuffs. The footage hit the internet within minutes, viewed millions of times by morning. When Mei Lin saw it, she didn't cheer. She didn't smile. She simply whispered, "It's over." Victor placed a hand on her shoulder. "Not yet," he said softly. "He'll still try to twist the story. But for now, breathe. You earned this peace." She nodded, holding hope close, her heart steady for the first time in years. Outside, thunder rolled across Hong Kong's skyline, but this time, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like applause. The empire that began with greed ended with silence, and justice finally had a name. The courtroom was packed to the walls. Reporters filled every seat, their cameras aimed toward the front where Richard Wallace sat in shackles, his once impeccable suit replaced by a wrinkled orange jumpsuit. His face, once broadcast as the picture of success, was now pale and hollow. Mei Lin entered quietly, holding her head high. The murmur of the crowd softened as she took her seat at the plaintiff's table. Dressed in white, she looked almost ethereal, the calm in the storm she had survived. Victor sat behind her, his presence solid, protective. The judge called the court to order. In the matter of Mei Lin Zhao Wallace versus Richard Wallace and Madame Zhao, the court will now hear closing statements. Richard's lawyer, Harvey Lang, stood first. He tried to sound confident, but even his voice cracked under the weight of defeat. "My client made mistakes," he said, "but he is not a monster. He is a man who was manipulated by family expectations, business pressure, and—" Mei Lin's attorney, Sarah Chen, interrupted with quiet authority. "Pressure does not excuse cruelty. Expectations do not justify violence. Every bruise on her body, every sleepless night, every threat, that was a choice." The courtroom fell silent. Then the judge nodded toward Mei Lin. "Mrs. Wallace, would you like to speak before sentencing?" She stood slowly. Her palms were damp, but her voice was clear. Your Honor, for a long time, I believed silence would keep me safe. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I obeyed, things would get better. She turned to face Richard, but silence only made him stronger. Richard's jaw tightened, but his eyes wouldn't meet hers. I lost everything, Maylin continued. My home, my dignity, almost my life. But what hurt most was being told I didn't matter, that my baby didn't matter, because she was a girl. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. My daughter's name is Hope, and she will never grow up believing that her worth depends on anyone else's name. She will know that her mother fought for her. A tear slipped down her cheek. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here so no one else has to live afraid of the person they love. The judge leaned back, eyes heavy with gravity. Thank you, Mrs. Wallace. He turned to the defense table. Richard Wallace, please rise. Richard stood, his hands shaking. The judge's tone was firm. After reviewing the evidence, including financial fraud, falsified documents, and the attempted forced termination of pregnancy, this court finds the defendant guilty on all counts. Gasps filled the room. Richard's head dropped as the judge continued. You are hereby sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, with no possibility of early release. Madame Zhao's cry broke the silence, raw and desperate. He's my son! You can't! Remove her from the courtroom, the judge ordered. As officers led Richard away, he turned once toward Maylin, his expression a mix of rage and regret. But she didn't flinch. When the gavel struck, the sound echoed like thunder. Final, absolute. Outside, the courthouse erupted in applause. Reporters shouted her name, but Maylin didn't stop for cameras. She simply stepped into the sunlight, closing her eyes as the warmth touched her face. Victor walked beside her. It's done, he said softly. She smiled faintly. No, it's just beginning. As the crowd cheered behind her, Maylin lifted her daughter into her arms. The world finally heard her voice, and this time it would never be silenced again. The months following the verdict felt strangely quiet. After years of fear, chaos, and screaming, silence was no longer suffocating, it was peaceful. Maylin moved back to Hong Kong permanently, trading the cold marble of the Wallace mansion for a modest apartment overlooking Victoria Harbour. Every morning, she watched the sunrise with Hope on her lap, the pink light reflecting in her daughter's curious eyes. For the first time, her life didn't feel like survival. It felt like living. The world hadn't forgotten her story. She was invited to speak at conferences, interviewed by global networks, even offered book deals, but Maylin turned most of them down. The story isn't about fame, she told Victor one evening as they shared tea on the balcony. It's about freedom. He studied her for a moment, then smiled. You always did know how to find meaning in the ruins. Victor had become her closest confidant, not just the billionaire brother who saved her life, but her anchor. Though stoic by nature, he had changed too. The man who once believed emotions were weakness now found strength in empathy. Still, the scars lingered. There were nights when Maylin woke trembling, flashes of that awful night replaying behind her eyelids, the slap, the scream, his hand around her throat. On those nights, she would hold Hope close and whisper, "We're safe now. He can't hurt us anymore." Hope was growing fast, all chubby cheeks and laughter. Every time she called Mama, Maylin felt something deep inside her mend. The world continued to turn, but Richard Wallace's name had vanished from it. His company was dissolved, his properties auctioned off. The media moved on to new scandals. Only one article remained pinned at the top of search results: the woman who broke her silence, Maylin's victory. Madame Zhao, disgraced and alone, returned to Shanghai under police investigation. The once feared matriarch now lived behind closed doors, her empire gone. One evening, a letter arrived at Maylin's door. No return address, just her name written in trembling ink. Inside was a single line: "Forgive me if you can. I was blinded by legacy." It was signed, Zhao Lianhua. Maylin read it twice, then folded it neatly. "Some apologies," she murmured, "come too late." She didn't respond, but for the first time, she didn't feel hate, only distance. A month later, Victor convinced her to attend a Women's Foundation gala. The organizers had named an award after her, the Hope Initiative, dedicated to supporting victims of domestic abuse. When she walked onto the stage, the audience stood in applause. Her voice was steady, clear. "I used to believe strength meant staying silent. Now I know strength means speaking, even when your voice shakes." The room fell quiet. some wiping away tears. After the event, a young woman approached her, trembling. "You don't know me," she said, "but your story saved my life. I left my husband last month. I just wanted to say thank you." Mei Lin smiled softly, her eyes shining. "No," she said. "You saved your own life. I just reminded you that you could." Later that night, back home, she tucked Hope into bed. The city lights shimmered through the window, gentle and forgiving. She whispered to her sleeping child, "You'll grow up in a world where your voice matters. That's my promise." Then she looked up at the stars, the same stars that had once watched her cry in silence, and smiled. The storm had ended. But from its wreckage, a new dawn had begun. A year had passed since the verdict. The world had changed, or maybe it was Mei Lin who had. Gone was the fragile woman who once begged for mercy behind locked doors. The woman standing now on the stage of the United Nations conference in Geneva carried herself with quiet, undeniable power. She looked breathtaking in a white silk suit, her hair flowing freely, the symbol of a phoenix pinned to her lapel. The nameplate before her read, "Mei Lin Zhao, founder, the Hope Initiative." The audience waited, cameras flashing, translators poised. When she finally spoke, her voice carried through the hall with warmth and conviction. "A year ago," she began, "I was someone who believed silence was survival. I thought enduring pain made me strong. But silence doesn't protect you, it buries you." Her gaze swept across the crowd. "I was told I should be ashamed, that a woman's worth depended on obedience, that I should hide my scars and smile. But scars aren't shameful, they're proof we lived." The audience was spellbound. Victor sat in the front row, pride gleaming in his eyes. Hope, now toddling, sat beside him, giggling softly in her tiny pink dress, unaware that she had changed the course of her mother's life. Mei Lin continued, her voice rising. "We teach our daughters to whisper when they were born to speak. We tell them to forgive monsters before they even heal. But today I say this, our voices are not weapons, they are bridges, they build futures where fear once lived." A standing ovation erupted, but Mei Lin didn't smile right away. She took a breath, her eyes glistening. "To every woman still trapped in silence, I was you. And if you're hearing my words, know this. You are not weak. You are waiting to be reborn." Tears streamed down faces across the room. After the event, as she stepped outside into the cool Swiss air, the press swarmed around her. Reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Zhao, what's next for you? Do you ever regret speaking out? Will you ever forgive Richard Wallace?" She paused for a moment, looking at the horizon where the lake met the sky. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting," she said softly. "It's about freeing yourself from what tried to destroy you." Then she smiled faintly. "And I'm free." That night, she and Victor took Hope for a walk along the cobblestone streets. The lights reflected in the water, the air calm, serene. Victor handed her a small box. "Open it," he said. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet engraved with 3 words, "Born again free." Mei Lin traced the letters with her fingertips, her throat tightening. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Victor smiled. "So are you. You gave the world something no one else could." "Truth." She looked up at him, tears shimmering in her eyes. "And you gave me back my life." They stood together, silent but content, as Hope toddled ahead, chasing the reflection of the streetlights on the water. For the first time, Mei Lin didn't look back. The past no longer chained her. It shaped her, but it didn't define her. As the bells of Geneva rang in the distance, she whispered to the night, "I am no longer the unwanted daughter. I am the woman who refused to stay silent." And somewhere, beneath the same stars that once watched her suffer, the world seemed to listen. Because her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to every woman who dared to rise again. So that's how the story ends. If you're still here with us, my friend, it means something in Mei Lin's journey touched your heart. Maybe the pain, maybe the strength, or maybe that quiet moment she chose herself over her fear. Life does that to us too, doesn't it? It breaks us, bends us, and then softly asks, "Will you rise again?" The Stoics used to say, "What stands in the way becomes the way." That's healing. It's not about forgetting what hurt you. It's about walking through it stronger, clearer, wiser. Mei Lin's voice reminds us that silence is never safety. Truth is. And forgiveness? It's not for them, it's for us, so we can finally breathe again. If you're fighting your own storm right now, remember, you're not broken, you're becoming. So take a deep breath, stand tall, and know that your story isn't over yet. And hey, if this story moved you even a little, give it a like, share it with someone who needs courage tonight, and subscribe to our channel. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we remind each other how to begin again.